everybody. As some of you may know, I just got back from Puerto Rico last weekend, and so now I'm going to do sort of a little video project in response to my experiences there, and submit it for a grade. As a part of that, the first part is to review a letter that I wrote to myself prior to departure, and so I'll go ahead and read that. It says, Dakota, I hope that you had a good time while you're there. I hope you learned a bit about relief efforts and partnerships, and your Spanish should be great and bring something back to use at work. Remember, take the weekend for you and come back refreshed and with a new outlook. You're ready to speak on the political stuff firsthand. Please be sure to live outside your comfort zone. Dakota. So with that, I really do think that I got a good first-hand experience with some of the stuff that's happening politically down there in the United States mainland's efforts. I heard a lot of stories firsthand about what was happening and how these American citizens were treated and neglected by their own government. So I really think that there's a lot of mistakes that were made on our part and a lot of ignorance and lack of outrage for what was happening down there. We get so far removed from these things that we forget that it's even happening. Unless it's happening in our own backyard, then it's kind of one of those like out of sight, out of mind things. I did learn a lot of slang while I was down there. Some things, most of it inappropriate, that I should not share. I really did appreciate like getting out of my comfort zone and meeting some new people. I really loved having the weekend to myself afterwards. It was a good time for reflection. Like I didn't even go out and get wild and crazy. Like I spent some time alone and had a blast. I just walked around the city by myself, went to the beach, hung out all day, and I think it was well deserved and well needed, especially after how crazy things have been at work lately and being in grad school. So I really did get to go out of my comfort zone. I've never been someplace where I am by myself on an island and there is literally no one on that island that I knew for more than a week, and it was kind of isolating but also like exhilarating at the same time. And I pushed myself. I went out one night by myself and had a really good time. I went and got so much food everywhere. Yeah, some of it did make me sick, but it was worth it. It tasted so good. Not only did like my system have a shock going there, upon return, the food here is so different that like my body was re-shocked and it was not pretty. But definitely in comparison, I guess this letter was kind of a commitment. It was me promising myself to go and experience and not let like fear and anxiety control what I wanted to do there. I had some goals and I set them and I really met them, and I'm pretty damn happy about it.
Solicito un porche. En un camino largo la encontraré. Solicito un porche. 10,000 cuadras a las millas cruzaré. Solicito un porche.
So, though everything was really great and it was an amazing experience, not everything is rainbows and butterflies in Puerto Rico right now. I had a lot of presumptions, I guess you could say, going into this experience, and there were honestly some things that I just didn't really know what to expect. Having been to El Salvador and Guatemala, I have seen some like pretty rough conditions, and I was kind of mentally prepared for that. But I think the biggest shock was to see, like, and to kind of undermine my idea that Puerto Rico is like an island in the Caribbean that, is just so disconnected, but, they are a part of the United States, and there are a lot of things that are just so mainstream there. So in that sense, it doesn't necessarily fit into that preconceived notion about it being some like foreign land. There are a lot of very mainstream states culture stuff there. There are things that are culturally different there than here. So I did kind of experience that stuff, but I think it came as a shock and it made it that much harder of a pill to swallow that, these American people are facing such devastating circumstances.
Solicito un broche. En un camino largo la encontraré. Solicito un broche. 10,000 cuadras a las millas cruzaré. Solicito un broche.
I did meet some people that went through the Hurricane Maria back last fall, and it was really difficult for a lot of them to talk about it. When you talk about such a traumatic experience like that, it's hard. You want to know that stuff, but you also don't want to re-trigger trauma that they've experienced. And another thing is, like, it's hard to move past that experience when there's constant reminders every day that it had happened. There are still signs and light posts, trees that are just destroyed. People's homes still have blue tarps across the top of them to kind of try and keep it dry. And so us going in and trying and wanting to hear those stories, we kind of also have to know our place and know when, like, that's a narrative that somebody has to come to owning themselves, and it's not really for us to come in and use it to advance ourselves professionally. It's sort of selfish. But in relation to that, though, I can kind of share how that's shaped my knowledge, skills, and values, and how it can kind of shape my work going forward. One of the biggest things is we went and talked to Enlace El Proyecto Martin Peña Caño Martin Peña, and there's a lot of work that's happening in the community to try and get people moved away from this canal. The families that have been there for since like the 40s and 50s, try and move them away from it so that it can be dredged and cleaned and reopened. There's a lot of vegetation and stuff that's overgrown through there, but in doing so, you have to move families out of an area, out of a community where they've been for generations, and that's, it's easy to see the goal and want to do that, but also at the same time you have to meet the family where they are and say, like, hey, I understand that this is a really sensitive thing, and that this is your home, but here's what we can do, and here's what we can do together to get to safety. When you're talking about floodwaters and sewage waters coming into their homes every time it rains, they understand that that's not healthy and that's not okay, but also, like, that's their home. So in organizing that community, they were able to have people who are also members of that community to be able to go and talk to the families and kind of work with them, because when you have that representation of other community members coming and talking, it makes more sense to people, and it's not just some outside government trying to exploit that area, which has happened in different parts of that community in that city, where a canal was dredged and it made it beautiful, and big companies and the government came and took advantage of that. So I think that's kind of really important for me going forward, working in social work, that kind of meeting people where they're at and utilizing resources and connections. There's going to be a lot of work that I do where I don't necessarily represent the client that I'm working with, as a privileged white male. You got to utilize the people around you, because sometimes you have to know your place, and especially going into community organizing and going into that policy planning and administration aspect of it. Those are things that I'm really going to have to keep in mind and know my privilege and check myself, and try and be conscious of a lot of that stuff. So, with Enlace, el proyecto de Caño Martín Peña, there is a lot, I guess, there's a lot of things, and the reason why that's such an area of concern is that people from that community have been exploited in the past, and there's been a lot of things happening where the government and other businesses and companies have sort of exploited that land there. They treat it as a dumping ground, even though there's families living there. There's a lot of concerns, though, that property will end up being taken back again by the government once it's quote-unquote valuable. So something that they've implemented that I think is really great is the land trust. So really the people as a community own that land together, which is very different culturally than the United States, because we are so individualistic and very possessive of our material things and property, and that's something that we value and goes way back to our Constitution, having people have private property and their rights to that. But when you're talking about generation after generation of poverty, and kind of land is the only thing that they have, and their homes, it becomes this people can be easily manipulated and taken advantage of, under the pretense and false notions that they're getting something good, but really they don't understand the value necessarily of what they have. So in coming together as a community and having a land trust, it really just helps create a very strongly organized group of people, kind of to push back against and know their rights and know and understand what they have of value there. So it's an area of concern, definitely. But there's people that have already kind of experienced that and know the ins and outs that are helping to teach and help people understand in that community.
Those cool kids stuck in the past, apartments of cigarette ash, wait outside until it begins. Won't be the first ones in. Spend your life waiting in line. You find it hard to define, but you